Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's Full Press NFL Sunday, and hopefully, well, maybe not right now because it looks like the Broncos are driving, but hopefully you were tuning in to us to avoid the pain of watching this game in London right now because it has been the highlights of the game so far have been Travis Etienne and two terrible interceptions by both quarterbacks. Braden, it's just another day in London. I picked the Jags to win this game just because, again, I don't have too much faith, although Broncos did just score. So it is 10-7. So there is a little bit of hope that the Broncos aren't out of it. But my confidence in that team has just hit an all-time low. And right now, even against the Jags, I'm going to have to take the Jags in this one. Did you pick the Jags? I can't remember if you went Broncos or Jaguars. I'm guessing Jacksonville.
Yeah, I went Jags. I just hope Russ did enough high knees on the plane that he's going to be able to feel pretty comfortable going back home. So I just think everything seems like a parody right now surrounding him and this team, and it'll be really interesting to see trade deadline come Tuesday if they move anybody. Bradley Chubb seems to kind of be the top piece that could be moved. It sounds like right now, and I don't know if I really believe for sure the Hackett rumors of, if they lose this game, he'll be fired. But it would not shock me if he only lasts 1 year at this point and gets fired.
Look, I mean, I think we all, or at least the assumption or the common thought process when it comes to this is that, well, Nathaniel Hackett was hired in hopes of luring Aaron Rodgers from Green Bay to Denver, and obviously that didn't work out. They settled on Russell Wilson, and settled seems like a generous term. It almost feels like they were forced to take him. Like, look, I've had my fun kind of, having a little fun at Russell Wilson's expense, just pushing my own agenda. But the reality of it is he's been really bad this year. They have his point, the Broncos offensive points and production up on the screen right now. And it's just, aside from that last drive, it's been pretty much non-existent. And they've been struggling mightily from in the passing attack. Now, I know he's been dealing with some injuries or whatever. I don't know how severe they are. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, he's faking it. I know you hear, injuries pop up after a bad game. You're like, all right, you kind of roll your eyes. You're like, yeah, all right, we'll see what happens. Look, they're just playing bad football right now. And to your point, this could be a very crucial game for them, because if they lose this game, I mean, I think they're out of it already, but they lose this game, you got to make some really tough decisions with the trade deadline coming up. And if you can somehow, the Broncos not only are having a losing season, but that trade to acquire Russell Wilson not only cost them a lot of money, but it depleted their draft capital. And you're trying to now look at a team that in year one looks like it's absolutely imploded on them, and you have to somehow recoup that. So, if Denver does lose this game, I would not be surprised if Nathaniel Hackett is gone, or you see a guy like Bradley Chubb get moved, because you need assets somehow to rebuild this franchise, which I think is looking like they made a colossal mistake going out and getting Russell Wilson, and then on top of that, giving him that massive contract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just, this team's been so bad for so many years now since the Super Bowl 50 win. So you talk about kind of all that waiting period and being able to kind of build the roster outside of the quarterback position. And, you've had a good defense for a while, and you have a pretty good skill position group on offense. And it's just when you make that move, it's just obviously the opposite of what they anticipated, but also you're seeing just, mentally and I think just motivationally, it's a lot of guys that are just seems to not be buying in right now to what this regime is selling.
Yeah, look, this isn't 100% Russell Wilson thing. I mean, to struggle this much, you need a number of things to go wrong throughout the year. And so far, you can point to coaching as being kind of the top, the top issue outside of the quarterback play. Now, the quarterback play has been bad, and we've talked about the Bucks to quite an extent. They lost, and we look at that situation a little bit differently, where it's I personally believe, and a lot of people seem to start to agree with me here, is that the coaching is the biggest issue there, not necessarily the quarterback play. Well, the coaching is the issue in Denver too, but you're also not getting good quarterback play from Russell Wilson, and that's a huge problem because that compounds. Now all of a sudden, again, you're looking at a team that prior to the season had playoff hopes. I wasn't as high on them as most, but they were, I'm not going to sit there and argue if you're going to say they might make the playoffs. I'm like, yeah, sure, that I can see that. Russell Wilson, as much as I knock him here and there, he's still a pretty good quarterback. That does not look like a possibility right now. And going back to the Bucs real quick, at least for them, they're in a crappy division. Even at the AFC West's worst day, they're already going to be 4 or 5 games behind this early in the season, and it's not even November yet. So big issues for Denver. And as we're about to hit the 2-minute warning in the second quarter, and the Jags are driving again. They're already at the 50-yard line. So those 7 points may not even really mean much here as we head into half because again, I just think the Jaguars at 2-5 are just a better team right now. And that's not saying much because I don't think they're a great team at all. So big issues. Yeah.
Yeah, they've had a lot of close losses. I think of this 4-game losing streak, all of them are 1-score losses right now. And I think they got to the 1-yard line last week against the Giants before the buzzer ran out. So they've been really close, but still just kind of finding their way.
Yeah, and look, I mean, this is normally you might be able to look at this situation and say, okay, it's a lost season, but. And I mentioned it earlier. The Broncos gave Russell Wilson a massive contract, tied to him until he's 40 years old. I don't believe they have an out, like a reasonable out, until 2026. So, wow. No pun intended, but you're riding with Russell Wilson until at least then. I mean, because I don't know how a franchise would recover from I think his dead cap hit would be in like the $20 million range in the next 2 years or whatever, if they were to release him or whatever. But I don't think it's to that point right now. And there's certainly plenty of time for them to maybe figure out a better system for him. Again, Nathaniel Hackett's probably not the guy, but there's an offense out there that could tailor made to what Russell Wilson does well. I don't know it specifically, but assuming you hold on to guys like Jerry Jeudy, you're going to have some talent on this team. You just got to make it work. And the biggest problem right now is the guy throwing the ball.
Yeah, I think it's just, I guess when I think about like coaching and something, I guess I've come to like the realization more in the last few years when we kind of see these McVay and Shanahan trees pop up. It's just, I think just that experience factor in coaching is kind of taken for granted a little bit, where I don't think much of this Broncos staff that was put together really were in the positions they were in before for more than like 1 or 2 seasons around the NFL. So I think that's something that, even though we see guys like Todd Bowles kind of struggling right now, I think of guys like, that Leslie Frazier, we got Doug Peterson in this game this morning. I think taking chances on those guys that for whatever reason didn't work out or didn't finish out the way they anticipated in other spots, it's worth maybe looking at them a little bit more than what sometimes they're given credit for, kind of compared to these, guys that are perceived as these geniuses that haven't really done anything yet at a high profile level.
I'll say this. I think much like the quarterback play in this league, I think coaching is very top heavy. You have about 3 or 4 elite coaches in this league, and that's it. Now, I'm not like big on this Sean McVay coaching tree. I think it's wildly overrated, including Sean McVay. Now, I've had to ease up a little bit on my criticism of him because they did go in and win the Super Bowl and everything like that. But there was a point in time a couple of years ago where it's like, man, if you even talked to Sean McVay, you were getting an interview for an offensive coordinator position. And right now, I'm looking across the league. I look at Matt LaFleur, I look at Kyle Shanahan, those coaches. And I see kind of the same thing, and it's nothing special. It's good creative offensive play callers, but they have fatal flaws, and they don't necessarily elevate their team above expectation. And we're seeing that right now in Green Bay, where it's like the last couple of years, Green Bay's had a lot of talent. They don't have that right now, and you're not seeing coaching elevate that team. Same thing in Green Bay or in Tampa Bay. Coaching is not able to. So how great are these coaches? Well, again, their reputation kind of exceeded what I felt their abilities were. And seeing that across the league where it's like, okay, yeah, it's great. It's, he's the new hip guy. I mean, we've seen it. We saw it with Mike McDaniel the first 3 weeks, and his stock kind of plummeted after the whole Tua concussion thing. And now we're seeing he's just kind of like a guy right now. Now, he can bring it all back together. And by the end of the year, we might be talking about him like that. But which coach is doing it quietly and doing it the way it's probably should be? Brian Daboll.
Right. Yeah.
He's not a guy like, and here's the thing. A couple years ago during the draft, there was, obviously part of it was obviously COVID related, and everyone was home. But I remember the Rams had, and the Cardinals did it too. And I believe San Francisco might have. They had this whole elaborate draft setup with all these extra TVs and this, that. And it was all about showing off all the flash and pizzazz. And I'm like, that means nothing to me. All right. You got Bill Belichick sitting on a folding table with a laptop. I don't need all that pomp and circumstance. And I think that was kind of a microcosm as to what these coaches were, where it's a lot of flash, a lot of style, a lot of, oh, he looks good, or he wears Yeezys, or, he does this or he does that. And it's like, oh my God, Sean McVay this, Sean McVay. Well, the reality of it is, how great of a coach are they? I mean, the Rams, look, they were, to his credit, he's brought them twice to the Super Bowl. And again, I got to ease up on my criticism of him, but we saw it even in his first Super Bowl appearance against Belichick and the Patriots. He was unprepared. I mean, I thought they lost the game the moment he went out there and was fawning over Bill Belichick. And, the whole idea of again, having someone specifically there to keep you from running. I always thought that was such a ridiculous, all right, we get it. You're so into the game, you can't even recognize where you're standing on the sidelines. You need someone to pull you up. Okay, great. And that makes for great talking points and great stories and great little quips and all that stuff. But the reality of it is, can these guys elevate less than talented teams? Can they elevate them above expectation? And I don't think so. Sean McVay, again, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because he's won a Super Bowl. Kyle Shanahan, I don't think so. Cliff Kingsbury, I don't think so. In fact, I think both of those guys have done the opposite. They've actually produced below expectations given the talent they have on their roster. So we see a lot of bad coaching in this league. A lot of again, I mean, Byron Leftwich was a guy that kind of got on the radar of some teams. And, again, maybe it's my Tom Brady bias, but I'm sitting here thinking well, yeah, of course he's going to look good because he's just been coaching a Tom Brady-led offense, of course. So it's but can he really coach? And right now we're seeing a team in Tampa that's struggling to elevate above expectations. And I think that's a common theme with a lot of these coaches. So the reality of it is, I think there's 4 really great coaches in this league. Bill Belichick, Andy Reid, could throw Mike Tomlin in there. Feel like I'm missing someone obvious, but maybe I'm not. Maybe that kind of speaks. And you know what? Maybe even Pete Carroll, because I think his stock has gone up, immensely over the last 6-7 months or so, given what he's doing with Geno Smith and obviously what Russell Wilson has been doing. So those are really the 4 elite coaches in this league. Sean McVay, I'll put him maybe in that second tier because, again, any coach can go out and win a Super Bowl. Doug Peterson did it, and I don't think he's an elite coach. I think he's a pretty good coach. But, the reality of it is 32 teams, there's 1/8 of those teams have, or 1/7 or whatever the math is, have a good coach. And that's not a great sign for a lot of teams.
Yeah. And I guess I just think to McVay and Shanahan and those guys, they just seem like, maybe Shanahan's a little bit different than Kingsbury and McVay, but it just seems like it's kind of a one-trick pony kind of style where, inability to adapt and I think just learn from the mistakes. It just seems like it takes so long for them to kind of rebound. Or in Green Bay, you're seeing the first kind of true test that LaFleur's really have. You mentioned, kind of less talent, but just a situation where they're below expectations and they're really having to fight for their kind of playoff lives right now. We just haven't seen, those adjustments have to take place from him, and it'll be interesting to see how he kind of approaches that in the second half of the season.
Yeah, and look, they do not have an easy landing today, and we're going to jump right into our picks because again we're about to hit halftime in the Jags and Broncos game, and we want to be able to get everyone back to their seats to watch the thrilling conclusion of this game. And I say that with a heavy amount of sarcasm. But we'll obviously pick the Green Bay and Buffalo game here last. But this is a huge game for Green Bay. Unlike the Buccaneers, they're in a position where their division isn't a heaping pile of dog bleep. You know what I mean? Like they're actually already behind the Minnesota Vikings right now. And as much as I don't believe in the Minnesota Vikings because, well, eventually you're going to have to play some primetime games, it's still going to be a tough hole to climb out of. So, all right, before we spend too much time on that and end up picking that game first, let's just dive right into it. So, like we both picked the Jaguars. Obviously, they're about to head into halftime with a 10-7 lead. Chicago at Dallas. Pretty big matchup for Chicago, coming off a big win. How are they gonna, maybe put it all together again? Was it a fluke? Was it what? I got Dallas winning this game. I just, another week with Dak Prescott getting healthy, getting back on the football field. They have a really good defense, and I think Chicago. I mentioned obviously Belichick as being the best coach in the league. I think the Patriots obviously have their issues and certainly created some of those bad situations. And to his credit, Justin Fields took advantage of them. I don't think that's going to happen again. I just think Dallas is too good. So give me the Cowboys in this one.
Yeah, I think with the Cowboys defense, it's going to be hard to kind of run that Justin Fields kind of quarterback draw direct runs up the middle all day. I just think there's too much speed on this Dallas defense. And like you said, another week of Dak. He hasn't been great when we've seen him this year, but I think this is kind of a game where he'll be able to kind of work his way through it with the young secondary that Chicago has right now. So I like the Cowboys in this one.
Next, we have the Patriots heading to the Meadowlands to take on the New York Jets. And I said this last week on FBC Radio Live. I just can't for the life of me pick the New York Jets to do anything good. So with that said, I do think the Patriots rebound. And look, last week was disappointing, and it's certainly kind of what you have to get used to with the Patriots now as opposed to what they were, for almost 20 years. They do a couple things really well, and then they kind of take a step back. I think that they can handle the Jets despite some of the injuries they have in the secondary. I think they're going to bounce back pretty well, and I think having an extra week of rest and practice for Mac Jones is going to do him well. So give me the Patriots on the road in this one.
This one was really tough for me just because New England coming off the loss that they had, and obviously the Jets losing two really good offensive players to injury in Elijah Vera Tucker and Breece Hall. But I did go with the Jets on this one just because I think with the way they're kind of playing defense right now, they can kind of keep this game close. And if Zach Wilson can figure a few things out, I think they'll find a way to win in a close one. So don't know how much confidence I have, but I went with the Jets today.
Yeah, I agree with our good friend Joel here. Yeah, the Pats definitely need to get some pressure because that was not there last week. And again, they kind of came out a little bit flat, and you kind of hope that that's not the case again this week because, well, then you'd be losing to the Jets. And then I think people might panic a little bit in New England. But next we have the Las Vegas Raiders heading to New Orleans to take on the Andy Dalton-led Saints. I got the Raiders in this one. Devontae Adams looks like he's good to go after battling a bit of a bout with the flu all week. They said he's healthy and looks like he's going to get suited up. New Orleans just isn't a good team right now. I think they're a little bit better with Andy Dalton under center. And for the first 3 games that he started, he was protecting the ball. Last week, 2 pick sixes, and it kind of, as soon as Kurt Herbstreit started waxing poetically about Andy Dalton, the wheels just fell off in a very spectacular fashion. But I think they do level themselves out a little bit here, and the Raiders are going to pick the win. So give me the Raiders on the road.
I got the Raiders as well. I think it's just kind of the war of attrition right now. We're seeing Josh Jacobs humming and the Saints just not very healthy. kind of weird to see not a very good defense in New Orleans. It's not something that I've been used to for a long time. So I kind of expect a lot of points today, but I'm going to go with the Raiders.
And look, this is a kind of, and I'm not saying I haven't paid attention enough to New Orleans to make a strong enough judgment on this, but it could be a lot of the same things that you're dealing with in Tampa, where Dennis Allen, really good defensive coordinator, obviously was a big reason why that defense last year played as well as it did. However, he is now the head coach, so much like in Tampa, Todd Bowles was a pretty good defensive coordinator for them, albeit that last decision to all out blitz against the Rams. We could discuss that all day, every day. But the point is now they're both head coaches, and now it seems like both units have kind of taken a step back in consistency. Certainly, I know from a Buccaneer standpoint, it has. I don't know about the Saints altogether, but yeah, they're just a team that even last year with Sean Payton, it wasn't a great team. I think they overachieved greatly, and they relied a lot on a lot of gimmicks and stuff like that to win games, and that's just not coming this year. So, anyways, next we have Pittsburgh at Philadelphia. Philadelphia 6-0, or sorry, 6-0, looking like a team that might win at least their next handful of games based on their schedule. And again, Pittsburgh had that big win against the Buccaneers, but this is a team that I have zero confidence in, and I don't think is anywhere good, and not going to be able to compete with this Philadelphia team, who just seems like they're just playing very balanced, very good football across the board, and that's hard to beat, especially when you're a bad team like Pittsburgh. So Philadelphia at home, moving on to 7-0.
Right. Yeah. Not a whole lot to add. Usually Pittsburgh can kind of keep these games close when they're not expected to, but I just don't see that today with how Philadelphia's kind of got so much physicality in the trenches, and we know how much Pittsburgh struggled with their offensive line. So even though the Steelers can usually keep it close, I think the Eagles should kind of win pretty handily today.
And next we have Arizona at Minnesota. Minnesota at 1:00 at home against we've talked about Arizona. They have issues, coaching issues. They have play calling issues. They have the talent. They have the talent, and I'll criticize Kyler Murray, but he's a special talent in a sense that he does certain things that not everyone can do. So you add all those pieces together, you're like, okay, this team should be able to win some games consistently. I don't see that all the time. I don't see that happening, and I don't see that happening here. So Minnesota at home, and it only will add more pressure to the Packers later tonight. So we're kind of planting that seed for when we talk about that game in a little bit. So give me Minnesota over Arizona.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think this could be a game that also has a lot of points, similar to Raiders Saints. I think DeAndre Hopkins being back, it was kind of interesting to see how Kingsbury kind of used those receivers. I know AJ Green didn't really get a lot of snaps, so that'll be, I guess, one thing to kind of watch for in this one. But I do think the Vikings will take care of business today.
Next, the winner of this game will have sole possession of first place in the NFC South, and again, it'll be for a nice little trivia question late in the season, who was leading the NFC South midway through the season. But Carolina at Atlanta, again, Carolina is kind of, I don't know, half-assing a rebuild. They got rid of Christian McCaffrey, which I think they should have done. Robbie Anderson had to go. But maybe they're going to fool themselves into thinking that they might actually have a chance for this division because of the struggles of Tampa Bay. But look, the reality of it is I don't think that either of these teams are going to be at the top of the division, even if Tampa continues to not completely find its way. I think eventually they're going to at least get enough wins to win this division. But it'll be interesting to see what the discussion is over the course of the next week when either Atlanta or Carolina is number one in the division. And in my opinion, it's going to be the Atlanta Falcons, who, they haven't necessarily got all the wins, but they've been competitive and have shown flashes. And we'll see. At the end of the day, one of these teams are going to be first in the NFC South, which no one would have probably predicted 6 weeks ago.
I got the Falcons. I think Arthur Smith, just the job he's done each of the last 2 years with kind of the talent discrepancy, is really impressive. And just to see, like you said, how competitive they've been in every game. I just think that's kind of interesting to see with Marcus Mariota at quarterback, a guy that really hasn't started in the last few years. So I just think the way he's kind of playing right now, he's doing all the right things. Game manager is something that not a lot of people like to say, but sometimes it's not the worst thing to have in the world, and I think he'll kind of continue to do that today and lead Atlanta to a win.
Next, we have the Dan Campbell. And would it surprise you if I told you that Dan Campbell had more wins as the Dolphins interim coach than he has with the Lions right now?
I kind of knew that he had a decent amount of wins, so no, I don't think it would be too surprising to me,
No.
but maybe some people out there,
Well,
for
and
sure.
yeah, and this is another example of how look, a lot of our business, a lot of how sports are talked about, it's all about hype and how you
Mhm.
sell that hype and how you talk about that hype. And, Dan Campbell is certainly a guy that's all about hype. And, everyone was getting, throwing their arms up in the air about biting kneecaps and, just bringing a different environment to the Detroit Lions. Well, um, since they got rid of uh,
Caldwell.
thank you, Jim Caldwell. I trust me, I did not want to forget his name because I'm trying to put some respect on his name. They've progressively gotten worse. So the decision to get rid of Jim Caldwell, which many thought was, wow, you have to do it because he was barely over 500 with the Lions. Well, Matt Patricia was bad, and Dan Campbell has somehow been worse, even though he was viewed as, oh, thank God we got Dan Campbell in here to save us from the Lions. And a few weeks into the season, we're like, wow, these guys are really playing for him.
Mhm.
Well, they're playing for him and losing. So how good is it really? So again, I don't know how much longer the honeymoon phase is going to be with Dan Campbell. I feel like maybe that collar starting to tighten a little bit on him and on this team because again, at the end of the day, you're not going to keep fawning over his sound bites if they're losing because then it just becomes a nuisance, and I think that's what's going to happen here. So Miami on the road, give me the Dolphins. And look, I'm not entirely convinced that the Dolphins are going to be this great powerhouse AFC team this season, but I think they're going to take care of business against Detroit.
Right. Yeah, really bad Detroit defense, and I think they're maybe missing some guys health wise in the secondary today. So Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill probably going to have a lot of yards, and I think with Campbell, kind of the tough thing in not just the NFL but really any sport, it's just sometimes in these massive rebuilds, the guys just never see through, to the greener side of things. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's gone after the season. I think there's just so much riding on kind of the stretch of games in the next few weeks where you're looking at kind of draft position standing and all that. I believe they hold kind of the number one spot right now going into today. But yeah, I think Miami should put up a lot of points, and I got the Dolphins today.
Next, we have Malik Willis making his debut with Ryan Tannehill on the shelf for Tennessee, heading to Houston, who it looks like they may or may not be trading Brandon Cooks. And if history gives us any indication, yeah, Brandon Cooks is probably going to get traded because that's what he does. I like Tennessee in this one, although again, I'm not terribly sold on either team. I think Tennessee's better coached and at least has more talent on their side, but it's going to be tough for a rookie quarterback in any situation going in and making their
Right.
first start. So maybe we're going to get something like a sloppy 24-20 type game, So give me Tennessee on the road one.
Yeah, I wondered about changing my pick with kind of the quarterback situation, but I just think, like you said, looking at the coaching staff, there's such an interesting formula to how this Tennessee team is able to kind of handle these moments and handle tight games. So I'm going to stick with the Titans.
All right, next we have New York at Seattle, a very sneakily good matchup, and I've been very impressed with what I've seen from Seattle. Again, we talked about Pete Carroll earlier. For years we were kind of, why isn't he letting Russ cook? Well, maybe there was a reason for that, and as things have played out so far, and it doesn't mean this is exactly how it should be discussed or whatever. And, we could be talking next season while Russell Wilson is on his way to winning an MVP. You know what I mean? Like things can change drastically, but through 8 weeks right now, Pete Carroll's stock has skyrocketed and Russell's has plummeted. So, read between the lines, whatever you want. He's doing it with Geno Smith right now. Although, even at home, I think the Giants are going to win this game on the road, rather. Seattle's at home. On the road, I think the Giants are going to go in because, again, I like what the Giants are doing. Daniel Jones, the biggest thing to me is he is not turning the ball over. Right. And he's making smart decisions. And that's something that, not necessarily to the degree of Josh Allen's progressions, but he's, over the course of his few seasons in this league, has gotten a little bit better in those situations. He's turning the ball over less. I've mentioned it every single week because I think it's worth mentioning that there's a reason why they're winning games, and it's that he's not turning the ball over like he used to, and that has a trickle-down effect. Brian Daboll is a big reason for that. So to me, I think the Giants are going to go in, and through 8 weeks, they're going to be 7-1, and I would have never guessed it. So give me the Giants on the road here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is like the only game this week where both teams have a winning record. So a lot of good vibes. I think running back fans will love this game. Kenneth Walker III and Saquon Barkley, the way they're playing. I'm actually going to go in this one just because I think this might be a defense that is able to kind of keep points off the board against Daniel Jones and Saquon. So I'm really excited to watch this game, but I'm going to go with Seattle here.
All right, next, this would have been probably top billing in many, many, many matchups in the past. You have San Francisco heading to Los Angeles to take on the Rams. I'm still not sure what the Rams are going to be this year. I just don't know. Again, this is going to be an opportunity for them to a very intense game with a division rival who coming off a couple disappointing output against Kansas City. I think given another week with Christian McCaffrey in the mix, I think this offense is going to get moving a little bit better. And I do like the San Francisco 49ers on the road in this one. I haven't seen enough from Los Angeles to think that they've gotten over their early season struggles. So give me San Francisco.
I'm going San Francisco as well. I think outside of the NFC Championship game last year, the Niners just have dominated this matchup between Shanahan and McVay. So just seems like San Fran always kind of knows what's coming from this team, and I kind of expect that to keep rolling today.
All right, next, remarkably, in the Washington-Indianapolis game, neither Carson Wentz or Matt Ryan will be under center for their respective teams. This could have been billed as the Carson Wentz Bowl, the former Colts quarterback, but it will be a rookie versus Taylor Heineke. So get ready for some pretty poor quarterback play. And let's be honest, even if those other two were starting, you'd probably still get some pretty poor quarterback play because neither of them have been really that good all season. So I took Washington because I don't know. I had to choose one. And I kind of landed on Washington because I feel like their ceiling can potentially be higher because I think they have two talented running backs. I think they have some talent on offense. And if push comes to shove, I've seen Taylor Heineke make some plays before. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. This is really big. He's a poor man's Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Ryan Fitzpatrick is a poor man's good quarterback. So do the math. He can have his moments. It's just not going to come at any frequency, and certainly usually not in the big moments. So, but in this one on the road, I do think Washington will eke out a win.
I went Washington as well. I think maybe Heineke, like kind of the reasons you mentioned, is a little bit why I went with this game. But I just think the Colts, it's kind of like I think just how we started the show talking about the Broncos. I just think the formula they have going for them right now, it's just not anything, that the players are buying into, and it seems to run its course. So I'm going to go with Washington today.
Yeah, that's another guy that could find himself very quickly on the hot seat this season, and that's Frank Reich. And look, I mean, Indianapolis, they're not they've made poor personnel decisions too to put themselves in this position. Trying to use a Band-Aid at quarterback and one that a Band-Aid that was already ripped and broken. So that's kind of on management's fault. But all right, last but not least, right before the start of the second half, and it was perfect timing on our part, we have Green Bay at Buffalo, and we talked about the urgency that Green Bay should be showing. A lot of the issues we talk about and some of the struggles that we've seen from Tampa Bay, you can say the same thing about Green Bay. I don't think their quarterback is the biggest problem, and quite frankly, I think it's the least of their problems. However, it still doesn't mean that this team is playing good football right now, and I cannot, coming off a 2 weeks rest off a huge win over Kansas City, I just cannot see how Buffalo would lose this game. Maybe if they were going to Green Bay, I might consider it. But right now, I think Green Bay is in a precarious position that if my prediction of Minnesota winning earlier in the day comes true, they're going to find themselves potentially 3-4 games behind in the division. And you can almost begin to write them off at this point, because even if Minnesota struggles and comes back to earth, which I think will happen because they do have some primetime games, so you can chalk those up as a couple losses, and certainly they might lose one to Green Bay later in the season. It might take until the very end of the season for them to get back into the playoff mix, and it might be a little too late. So to me, I got Buffalo winning this one, and I think the spread right now is 10.5, 11. They might actually cover that, and I mean, that's what I'm saying. I can't see right now because Green Bay's offense is struggling. Their defense isn't as good as I thought it was going to be, and you're running into one of the 2 or 3 quote unquote juggernaut you can count on, bank on teams in the league right now, and that's Buffalo. So give me the Buffalo Bills by a fortnight.
Yeah, it's weird to see Green Bay not even throw the ball down the field right now. It's all kind of just screen passes and swing passes out to the flats, and I just don't even know if they're going to reach double digits on this game in the scoreboard. So yeah, I think bettors out there would be remiss if they don't today. So yeah, I'm not really expecting a whole lot of competition in this game. I don't really think it'll be very close. I got Buffalo.
Well, and here's the silver lining for Green Bay. If they can pull off this win, it could be the catalyst that they need to turn their season around. So within this, what seems like dire situation could present them a great opportunity to kind of get their season going. But I just unfortunately don't think it's going to happen. So thank you everyone for tuning in. And if you want, go back and start watching that second half of that Broncos Jaguars game. Jaguars right now, Travis Etienne, I'm hoping has a big second half because he's on my fantasy team, and I'm making a historic comeback after starting 0-6 this season. I will guarantee I'm going to make the playoffs and hopefully win a championship. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Give us a follow on Twitter at FullPressNFL. And, of course, head over to FullPressCoverage.com to see all the latest. And stay tuned all week as we cover the trade deadline coming up next week. So thank you, everyone, and we will talk to you soon.